bring up an interesting point when you bring up the distinction between the small and large businesses. So during the pandemic, for example, companies like Amazon benefited the most. They had a disproportionate amount of influence of share price increase, of capital increase, of sales increase, because
I'm
they're
guilty
able
of
to.
contributing to it.
Yeah, I know we all are. And the mom and pop retailers or the mom and pop small businesses weren't able to, first of all, benefit from the same exemptions that were given to places like Costco, right?
The virus didn't go to Costco. It didn't go to
Right,
grocery
right,
stores.
exactly.
It didn't go to Walmart.
Hmm.
Apparently, because they were essential. They were essential to stay open.
Right,
But
and weed
somehow
stores as well,
small,
by the way.
yeah, but somehow small businesses, they
Mhm.
weren't essential. They could be shut down. And so they were, and that is why they were just so disproportionately impacted by this pandemic, which thankfully for policies like the Paycheck Protection Program that was passed last year and created a lifeline for directly for small businesses to help them get over some of the difficulties and keep their employees connected to the company and paid. I mean, over 5 million companies benefited from the Paycheck Protection Program. It's said to have saved over 51 million jobs. I mean, that is probably one of the most successful government programs that I would ever point to. And I'm not a fan of government programs, but that one was necessary for the time and for the emergency that was happening.
And so with a payment protection program, that was a spending policy that I think a lot of us can agree on. It was a temporary lifeline, as you said, to small businesses, to get them over the hump of this, black swan event, this pandemic that ravaged all sorts of industries, particularly, as we said, the small businesses, more so than giant corporations. Now we have all sorts of other spending measures that are being proposed by the current administration. Um, we see inflation becoming a problem again for the first time in a long time, like significant levels of inflation. They claim it's transitory, and that you know supply chains and empty stores are a indication that Americans are richer and spending all this money. What are you hearing from the small businesses in terms of their fears about inflation? Are they talking to you about it? Are they talking to you about the supply chain issues? Do they have any sense of it? Are they concerned about it?
Well, actually, we do a monthly poll of a national poll of small business owners. It's called the Monthly Monitor. We poll about 500 small businesses nationally. One of their most major concern is inflation and the cost of goods. I mean, you see the cost of energy going up, the cost of gas going up. Meat, pork. I always joke, who doesn't like bacon? Well, it's up 11%. Meat's up almost 20%. To rent a car is up almost 40%. Gas is up 50%. I could go on and on. Everything is going up. And a lot of these companies, restaurants, whatever it is, are working on very slim margins, again, still trying to recover. And they're not able to pass these costs onto consumers so readily. Some of them are trying to, and so consumers are seeing the increase. But the poll also shows that only about 10% of small businesses have fully recovered from the pandemic.
Wow.
So you're talking about 90% of our small businesses
Mhm.
that are still struggling to get back to pre-pandemic levels. And we've spent all of last year or all of this year, sorry, basically up until Labor Day weekend, small businesses has their second complaint, I would say, is probably the labor shortage. We're
Mhm.
seeing the biggest labor shortage we've seen. I mean, it's crisis at this point, but it's a crisis that was government created, and it was created because they were literally paying people to stay home.
Right.
And so small businesses were competing with government for labor, and nobody can compete with the government. They have an endless bank account, and that's our tax dollars, and that's exactly what they've been doing, is paying people to stay home. That's ended, but we haven't seen the rebound yet of people actually getting out there. We still have 5 million fewer people working than we had pre-pandemic, and we have almost double that in jobs available. So there's almost 2 jobs available for every person.
Wow.
So there's a lot of choice out there. If you want a job today, you can go get one. If you want a new job today, you can go get one. If you want another job, if you want 2 jobs, you can go get one. So it just doesn't make sense, other than the policies that are coming out of this administration are not creating the same type of pre-pandemic prosperity that we saw under the Trump administration, which was not just pro-business, but I say it was pro-small business. And we saw that because small business really drove this economy during that entire term. And you may not like mean tweets, and you may not like how he approached things, and some of the things that the previous president said.
BlackRock
I
didn't.
get that.
Sure.
What'd you say?
BlackRock didn't. Right.
Yeah.
The big corporations did not like the previous administration.
Yeah, I
You can't
mean,
argue that. Yeah.
but at the same time, he's not coming to your house for dinner, but his policies were impacting what you were talking about around your kitchen table. When's my next vacation? How much is in my savings account? How much more can we set up a savings account to put our kids in college? Those conversations were being had, and those things were happening from Americans because of the prosperity. We saw wages grow at a rate that was faster than the previous decade. Average hourly wages grew at 3%. They were actually growing faster than white collar workers, salaried workers. And those at the bottom of the income spectrum, the bottom 10%, they were growing twice as fast. So people were earning more, they were keeping more of their money, and they were living their life. So like I said, a few mean tweets, but your life was better financially. I guess I'd pick the other one.
No, I think you hit on an important point there. A lot of people forget. So right before the pandemic, the 2019 numbers, there was a $6,000 increase in the median wage for the average worker, the average family income, which was 45% higher than Bush in 8 years or Obama in 8 years. So and Trump got a 45% higher increase in the median wage of a family, median income of a family in 1 year than they did in 8 years. But yeah, overshadowed by the mean tweets.
Exactly, and that's unfortunate. During from 2017 to 2019, after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed, 6.6 million people were pulled out of poverty because of the prosperity under the previous administration and the policies that allowed businesses and small businesses in particular to grow this economy. 6.6 million people. So when you hear people like Senator Bernie Sanders and AOC stand up there and talk about a $15 minimum wage and we've got to have a living wage, well, many companies, most of them that I speak with, they say, well, I've got to pay more than that anyway.
Right.
So why have a government mandate? It's happening. It is happening. It's not a win for them, but we have to let the natural forces work. And when we do that, and it's not government induced, we see the record unemployment that we saw. We saw the largest workforce that we had ever seen in the country under the Trump administration just before the pandemic. But every demographic across the board benefited, whether you were white, Black, Hispanic, Asian, even felons, even convicted felons had the lowest unemployment rate. So I could go on and on about what the benefits of those policies were, but I don't know if you're a Seinfeld fan, but I was a Seinfeld fan. It was like bizarro world for me when I listened to how it's described by President Biden, by the Democrats, by some of the senators that I've referenced when they talk about how bad it was under the Trump administration, because he truly created an environment that President Kennedy said, a rising tide lifts all boats. That's exactly what we saw for everyone.
Right. And even with I remember the Black unemployment rate was the lowest ever at something like, I forgot the exact percentage number, maybe but that was lowest ever. The Hispanic unemployment rate was lowest ever. And so I actually want to ask you, so obviously, as we discussed, Trump had a fairly significant increase in the median household income in his time in office prior to the pandemic. But it's a blimp because overall, since say the 1970s, for the middle income families and below, you have seen a largely flattened out wage curve up. Is there anything that Job Creators Network, any sort of legislation or reforms that they really look at in terms of lifting up that, both making it a more prosperous economy for small businesses and for employees? Like what do you think are the biggest sorts of impediments to lifting those people out of that sort of flattened curve of wages that's been going on for almost 50 years largely?
Well, look. So the crowd that pushes the $15 an hour minimum wage, the living wage, when we actually went down into this is really boring stuff, but into the data of the BLS data to look at who's making below minimum wage. Who's making minimum wage? Sorry, you can't make below minimum wage. Who's making minimum wage at this point? And we took a look at who they were, how many they were, and what their age bracket was. And it turned out that there's only so let's kind of walk through life, right? If you look at the folks under 24 years old, that's kind of when you're done and out of college and everything like that. So there's only about 200,000 people in the whole country who were making minimum wage, probably through no fault of their own. And so I would rather focus on developing programs where we can identify those people and get them the training that they need. We have the resources in place. Heck, we have the training facilities in place. I've been to vocational schools and visited many of them and seen how they're turning out people who have skills that can get jobs and get them these 50,000 instead of trying to get them $15 an hour. Let's get them a $50,000 a year career
Right.
that they can grow in. So because if you're 25 or 35 years old trying to raise a family, working at McDonald's, that's not a career. But if we get you out of that job and we give you $15 an hour to do that, you still don't have any more marketable skills. But if we get you out of that job and get you training into some of these middle class jobs, in the medical field, or even police officers or plumbers. I mean, gosh, I joke all the time that in my next life I'm going to come back as a plumber because they make so much money
They do.
and they have
Yeah.
no college debt.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
so identifying those people, I think, would really go a long way instead of focused on government-induced mandates like $15 an hour wages. Because what's going to happen is the people who are currently making $15, $16, $17 an hour, if they've been doing this job, whatever it is, for so long, somebody comes in and the base wage is $15 an hour. Guess what that $18 an hour person wants? More money.
Mhm.
So you have upward wage compression. So the impact on small business isn't just the bottom level coming in, but it's all the levels coming in. And again, the person who makes $15 an hour working at McDonald's still doesn't have any more skills. They're not any more marketable. They don't have a career. And so those are the things to consider. But unfortunately, there are those in the government that think that they know best, even though they have never run a business. They've never signed the front of a paycheck. They should really talk to the small business community, and they should really talk about what it means to run a business and what it means to employ somebody and be responsible for their livelihood.
Absolutely. I think one of the things I always look at in Europe, for Germany and Switzerland, do a really good job at the vocational training skills. That's why they have some of the most sort of artisanal, respected products. Is they get a lot of people into these programs early on. I think one of the things that people in my age group and even younger are starting to realize is that college degree, if it's a worthless degree, you're coming out with 100 grand in debt or something like that, and then you still have no skills. And then you can sort of understand why socialism is becoming a sort of more popular topic, unfortunately, and belief system is because these people are promised that if they go to college, they'll come out with a job, but then they go to college and they're not being taught any actual marketable skills. And in fact, they're I've met some people who are worse off from going to college, seriously, in terms of the ideas that are fed into their head and the sorts of bad habits that they develop, and then they come out with a degree that's just worthless. So, yeah, good.
Well, certainly being a college student is a great life.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a senior in college right now, and she lives a great life. But she is pursuing a marketable career. She's going to be a
Mhm.
nurse. But she has friends who are focused on, you know, uh, degrees that I frankly have never heard of.
Mhm.
And I don't want to make fun of them on air. But degrees that I just never heard of, and I can't see a job at the end of it.
Mhm.
And if you ask them, they can't see a job at the end of it either. It's interesting, and it's a great thing. These are great things to learn about. But if you can't see a job at the end, particularly if you're going to take on $100,000
Right.
in college debt, you know, then that's probably not the career for you. And
Mhm.
you know, and this college debt is a big problem. And now you've got you know, some of the bills making its way through Congress that are going to forgive, you know, they want to forgive all of it or portions of the college debt, you know. And as somebody who you know, who did the paygo plan, you know, you know, it doesn't seem fair that other people would have, you know, other taxpayers would have to foot that bill, especially if the careers aren't, there isn't a job at the end of that degree. But you're right about Europe. They do have a great public private partnership in training people and getting people to have skills.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one to solve as well, is because you have a $2 trillion problem now with the student loan debt. Um, and if our population of youngsters are saddled with this, and the kinds of people that we're competing with internationally aren't, so what's that going to do to entrepreneurship in the future, small businesses that are going to be created when people are saddled with this sort of debt? And so, I'm still trying to figure out and research a solution in my mind. I think it has something to do with, um, maybe not giving out loans to certain degrees that aren't going to actually lead to anything productive, that maybe if you have a like nursing, or I'm an attorney, but like my college degree wasn't is in political science, which was sort of a patter degree in order to get my GPA up to to get a scholarship into law school. But maybe that there needs to be some sort of distinction between that. But then you still have to solve this $2 trillion massive crisis, which is a whole different ballgame.